Welcome back to Creepin with your host, Professor Creepin. What's up, everybody? What's going on? Thank you guys so much for last week's episode. You guys showed up. I'm on, 44 subscribers currently, which is super impressive just for one video. 200 something views. The author loved it. You guys loved it. I want to thank everybody who came out, showed it love. I really appreciated it. Took me some time, took me a while. As you can kind of hear, I'm still a little sick. Yeah, I'm still working off the sickness. You guys were supposed to get 3 videos on that first day, but unfortunately I was so sick I could not record because my voice would have sounded pretty bad. I'm just coming off the sickness right now, so I might sound a little bit sick, but hopefully it is not too bad. Hopefully, you guys can survive. This video is one I've been waiting for. It's Jeff the Killer, guys. It's Jeff the Killer. Everybody clap. Everybody clap. Yay. It's Jeff the Killer. Before we get into that, actually, I do want to update one thing. For the time being, is going to be audio only. I'm debating getting a Podbean, I think is what it's called, membership, so I can have it on Apple Music and Spotify. And, really upgrade this podcast. I might do it. It's like $100 for, a year. So, who knows? I might do it. I don't know yet. I will get back to you guys, see what's going to happen. If you guys really want it, and you guys want it on more platforms, pop off in the comments. Let me know. I got some good feedback from the first episode. Some people, asked me a few things, get me a few things. I actually got in touch with a few more people. And I got some more art done, as you can see right now. The art you're looking at right now is by my friend Dingo. He's a great artist. Please go check him out. He's in the description. He's a wonderful guy. He's a great person. Yada, yada. And I would recommend checking him out. Checking out his work. Checking out his art. He's going to be my permanent artist for interior stuff. This image you're looking at right now was done by him. This is going to be the permanent setup now for images. Obviously, the title's going to be a little bit different for each one. I have some big plans now. I have some good ideas. I have some, big news. Just looking forward to it. There will be episodes outside of the podcast, outside of Creepin, just with Professor Creepin doing his assignments, etc., etc. Maybe a few extra, I don't know. I haven't really decided yet what other videos I want to do. Probably like a movie review or something like that. Anything you guys want me to talk about, review, any stories you want me to cover, pop up in the comments, let me know. I know people from the Creepcast Reddit joined. What's up, everybody? I hope you guys hopped in the Discord. I hope you guys, chatting with me, yapping up a storm with me, because I love you guys so much, and I love talking to you, and I love feedback, and I love, this is what I like to do. Any money that I make from this, I'm not making any money right now. I might do a Patreon, some merch in the future, but not right now. Any money I make from this is going to go right back into this. It's going to go right back into the set. It's going to go right back into the mic, the mic quality will be changing shortly. Hopefully. That way you guys can hear me and I don't sound like shit. Currently, I am recording this in my spare room. And by spare room, I mean my basement. That's why I might sound a little echoey at times. But that's enough housekeeping for today. I am not going to make you guys wait any longer. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Jeff the Killer on Creepcast. This is a great episode. This is a really funny episode. It's one of those stories where it's so bad, it's good. You know what I mean? Obviously, it was made by a younger kid. Clearly, it had to have been made by a younger kid because there's certain inaccuracies, I would say, that a young kid would definitely believe are true. So that's what leads me to believe that this was made by a young child. Jeff the Killer, what an icon. It's so crazy to see what it's become and what the idea, the imagery that has been spawned by this iconic character and the stories and the lore. But let's talk about what Creepcast covered. So Creepcast said they covered the Seuser version, which, wrong, they didn't cover the Seuser version. They actually covered the version made by Game Fuel TV. Technically it wasn't Game Fuel TV, it's Game Fuel TV's brother Travis. That's how we got that. It was actually a ripoff of the Seuser version, but the Seuser version there's very few things that are similar. I think maybe is it Randy? I think, yeah, Randy's in it in the Seuser version and Lou's in the Seuser version, but that's it. And the characters don't do the same things and the same stuff doesn't happen. The Game Fuel TV version is the one that they read. There's many other versions, which I will be talking about a few later on, including the Pastra rewrite and the Morgue Files version, which are two of the big ones that I'm going to be covering. because those are probably two of my favorite reimaginings of Jeff. There's Go to Sleep, which was the Mr. Creepypasta one. There's been sequels. There's been everything. So today we're gonna cover just Jeff the Killer in general. We're gonna talk about him. We're gonna yap about him. We're gonna see what we think about him. And by we, I mean me, because your opinions don't matter. Just kidding. I'm just kidding, guys. I'm just kidding. Okay, so for this episode, we're actually going to try something new. We're going to do like a little bit of a breakdown of the story. So Jeff the Killer basically starts off with Jeff and his brother Lou moving to a new town. And Jeff starts having these feelings. Eventually they meet these bullies, Keith, Troy, and Randy. They mess him up a little bit. Jeff ends up stabbing them, and the police show up to take Jeff to juvie. And Lou shows up with a knife and says, "No, it was me." They snatch up Lou, they take him to juvie instead. Jeff ends up having to go to a birthday party the next day. Keith, Troy, Randy, they crash the birthday party with guns. They start threatening the hosts, and then they start beating the crap out of Jeff throughout the house. Jeff one punches Randy and then beats the crap out of Keith and Troy. I think Keith's the last one. Keith lights Jeff on fire, which turns his face into what it is, and his skin white and his hair dark. They let Lou out of juvie because he's innocent. While in the hospital, Jeff's mind breaks. He does the classic maneuver of the knife in the mouth, then he kills his family. Story ends. This episode is actually really funny. They still haven't locked in on the exact formula of Hunter reading lines and Isaiah reading, obviously, paragraphs. They didn't read this one all the way through. They did skip some certain elements, which, I mean, it's a shorter story, so they were still just trying to figure out the format, I'm sure. They probably didn't want to do the full 2-hour reading. They're still figuring out the format. This episode is just, the story is just so funny. The funny moments in this episode are peak. You're gonna be sleeping with the fishes. The tub of lard, just everything. I have a personal story I'm actually gonna share about Jeff the Killer later on. Just the bits they were making out of it were super funny, and obviously big fan of Papa Meets Comedy approach. It's just something that speaks to me, and I think it's my kind of humor as well. And it's just so funny. I don't know how everyone pictures the birthday party scene, but I just picture everybody in suits and ties. I picture it as a wedding. This is a after party of a wedding. Everybody's in suits and ties and gowns and whatever. And then I just picture these 3 little kids leap over this fence, action movie style with Tommy guns, and are like, "Everybody get down on the ground. This is a stick up." That kind of thing. It's just, it goes 0 to 100. And the feeling lines, oh Lord. I really want to, if I ever do make merch, I want to do POV me when I have a feeling, on a black shirt, and then the picture of Jeff the Killer. I don't know why, it'd just be so funny. I have a feeling, which I can admit, I myself when I was writing when I was younger, I would do the same thing. I would describe everything as a feeling and repeat certain passages over and over, because I didn't even realize, I wasn't connecting it in my head that was something that I probably shouldn't be doing. That's just how young authors work. He was probably 13, probably around Jeff's age when he obviously made this story, which is totally relatable. I would make every character in my stories my age. I'd also make them my friends too. Any other character would be one of my friends, which they say that's the number one rule not to do when you're writing a book, is to include yourself as a character. But I was very guilty of that when I was younger. I would definitely use my name and my persona, or the made-up persona I had, where I was a super cool badass. I would do that. I would just do that. Moving on. This story... Oh, another thing I want to talk about. Him obliterating Randy's heart in one punch was the single most kid thing ever. Him just... Yeah! And one punching him. I don't know, I just made me picture that scene in Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, where they rip that guy's heart out, but it made me just think Jeff's doing the opposite. Jeff's punch blowing up Randy's heart. And the badass line of, I think it's Keith that's at the end, who's like, "Yeah." And then he throws the lighter, and then it lights it on fire, and then Jeff's skin turning white from that, which makes no sense. The added element of Jeff becoming a baby was so random too. But I'm so glad the guys covered this. I'm very glad this is one of the episodes they decided to do, because this is just a classic creepypasta. Everybody's heard of Jeff the Killer. Everybody knows Jeff the Killer. Everybody knows this character. He was part of the big, I would say one of the big 2, which was Slender Man and Jeff the Killer way back then. He was popping. Slender Man, I probably would say, was arguably the more popular. He had more games, he had Marble Hornets, etc., etc. But Jeff the Killer was killing it among young teenagers, especially emos, who just wanted to be edgy, and he was cool. And there was so much fan art of like sexy emo twink Jeff doing terrible things. There's also terrible stories, there's crossovers, which boy, do I got a section for you right now. Let's just do it right now. Let's talk about Jeff the Killer uncanon works. / canon. I guess you consider them canon, whatever you want to consider them in. I have a list of fictional characters Jeff the Killer has fought, whether in animation, a story, someone just asking a question. This took me a while to make. It's a long list, so buckle in. Jeff versus Jane, Slenderman, Ghostface, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, The Rake, GTA Thugs, SCP-096, SCP-106, SCP-3199, Eyeless Jack, FNAF characters, Jason Voorhees, Scorpion, Kratos, Jason Dean, Darth Vader, The Joker, Gojo, Batman, Chucky, Goku, Godzilla, Ronald McDonald, Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, Twilight Sparkle, T-Rex, Lincoln Loud, Shrek, Shaggy and Scooby, Lightning McQueen, Leatherface, Spider-Man, John Cena, The Undertaker, Babyface Killer, Jeff Hardy, Carnage, Venom, Smile Dog, Laughing Jack, Hannibal Lecter, Jeffrey Dahmer, Jack the Ripper, SpongeBob, Herobrine, Sonic EXE, Pennywise, Conan the Barbarian, Bellatrix Lestrange, Dexter, Thor, Captain America, Wolverine, Yautja, as in the Predator, Negan, Among Us, The Hulk, Vampires, Xenomorph, Harry Potter, Tommy Taffy, Jesus Christ, and the craziest one that I thought was so out there, Caillou. That's right. There is a Jeff the Killer fights Caillou Wattpad story, which is NSFW. Please don't go looking for it. It is not something that you should be reading. That involves an adult Jeff and an adult Caillou. Just picture what that would go like, and please don't go looking for it. Wattpad is a very weird place and a very weird website. I don't want you on there, okay? I want you in a better mind space than Wattpad, of the horny freaks that are on there. That is the uncanon / other, like, this is just the ones that I was looking for. That I was like, oh, did he fight this character? Did he fight this character? You could find, I'm sure, plenty more. I'm sure he's fought Power Rangers. I'm sure he's fought the Human Torch. I'm sure he's fought any horror or SCP or anything at all. I'm sure he's fought them. Historical characters. I think I saw Abraham Lincoln on one list. I don't know if I had him on there. Vin Diesel. I think he's fought Vin Diesel. People just be writing anything. Jeff the Killer fights anybody, which, a little spoiler for later. I will be reading one of those versus battles later. It's one of the more well done versions of a versus battle, and hopefully you guys will enjoy. I have a lot of guest voice actors, including, well, I'll leave it for a little bit later. We'll talk about it later. Let's move back to like the history of Jeff the Killer. I know the Sousa version came out 2008. I think Game Fuel TV came around about then. Creepypastas were like super popular, like 2010, 2011, 2012. 2013-ish. That's when you got like the Marble Hornets and Ben Drowned and Who is Phone or Who Was Phone, stuff like that. That's when you got Candle Cove, etc., etc. That's when you got those really iconic ones that were mostly trash. Most of their stories were very terrible and they're very poorly written. They didn't have any artistic integrity. Jeff the Killer as a story has a long and hard history. It got removed off the Creepypasta wiki for a while, and the creepypasta.com, because of how bad it was written, which was around the time they removed Sonic EXE, and that creator got very mad about that, which was very interesting. It's just poorly written, obviously, because it was definitely made by a kid, and it's so crazy to think that popped off. He's had other adaptations since then, obviously. He's also had video games, he's had short films, he's had AMVs, which is animated music videos. Please, there's a Slenderman and Jeff one that I think, it's at a One Republic or Imagine Dragons song. You know what, I'm gonna look it up. So the AMV is actually to Light 'Em Up by Fall Out Boy. I don't know why I thought it was Imagine Dragons. It's very interesting, very interesting. There's also a very popular like Epic Rap Battles of History ripoff. That's where I got the James Dean one from. There's also the Gojo and Jeff video, which is more like satire, it's more comedy, about Gojo giving Jeff backshots, which is, interesting, very interesting, I guess, if you're into that. There's also a very popular short film with Jeff the Killer and Ghostface, which I'm actually going to reach out to that creator and see if I can get in touch with them, because I really enjoyed it. I actually paused the recording and I just emailed them. So if you see a portion of this video, that is that. I guess you'll know that I spoke to them. Jeff the Killer is just such an interesting character. I don't know what it is about him. You know what? This is probably the best time ever. Let's talk about my personal experience with Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer is actually one of the first creepypasta-like characters I ever interacted with, personally. I was in elementary school. Sorry, I'm not that old. I think elementary school, maybe middle school. Someone on the bus showed me the picture, and they told me a variation of the story where the real version of Jeff the Killer lived in an abandoned warehouse that was nearby me. Actually, that was maybe a few cities over, but still was nearby me. And that picture terrified me. I used to look up that picture on my Nintendo 3DS and get scared, and I couldn't sleep. I would just see that face everywhere. I don't know what it is about that picture that's so terrifying to me, but it is literally the scariest photo I've ever seen, at least when I was a kid. I thought it was the spookiest thing ever. I would sit in Dunkin' Donuts, because that was where my mother worked, and I would be playing my Nintendo 3DS. I would just see that face, and then I would look it up, because I would try to test my might, I guess, to try to see how tough I thought I was. And every single time I failed, because it's literally the scariest photo I've ever seen when I was a kid. So someone told me the story and basically said that he killed kids and he lived in an abandoned warehouse near me. Which now, I'm going to share this story, this very embarrassing story of a very weird phase of my life. There's a kid on my bus. He liked anime, which I have a very strong opinion on anime. I'm not a fan of it. I've seen a few of them. Death Note, Hajime no Ippo. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. It's the boxing one. I've seen bits and pieces of Attack on Titan. Other than that, I don't watch anime. I don't watch many anime. A lot of my friends do. They're super into anime. Not a big guy. But he was big into Blue Exorcist. And while he was big into Blue Exorcist, I was big into Power Rangers. And we would talk about Slender Man and Jeff the Killer. And basically, I would roleplay on the bus that I was a proxy of Slender Man with the powers of the White Power Ranger. And my friend had Gold Exorcist, whatever that means, imbued powers. And that's how all of the creepypasta characters got their powers, including Jeff. That Jeff was empowered by Blue Exorcist, whatever that is, to give him the abilities and make him into a homicidal maniac. It actually led to the creation of one of my own personal characters way later on in life. That's my embarrassing story. And I would roleplay on the bus that I was getting possessed by Slender Man. And I would pretend to be an evil villain. And then my friend would resuscitate me by putting his book on my chest and saying made up words. And that would bring me back, and it would unlock my White Power Ranger powers. And that was me as a child. You can laugh at me for that. Let's talk about the rewrites. So the two Jeff the Killer rewrites that I know personally and have either read or listened to are the Morgue Files not rewrite, but I guess it's an audio drama basically that involves Jeff the Killer that does his backstory. It's a lot edgier, I think, and I do enjoy it. And then the Pastra rewrite, which I do enjoy very much. And for me personally, it is probably the best rewritten version of an OG creepypasta. I'll cover the Morgue Files one first. I actually tried reaching out to the creator, David Neer, to chat with him. He's on Cameo, which I might just buy a Cameo from him and include it somewhere in this video. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I guess we'll see. So basically, the Morgue Files version is a much edgier version. It's set in a universe where all the where all the creepypasta characters exist, but they're much more realistic and based in reality. So in this version, Jeff gets, maybe it's not super realistic. Jeff has problems with a local gang, and one of the gang members ends up lighting him on fire and beating the crap out of him and stabbing him and cutting his face up into the normal Jeff face and then throwing him into the water. And then Jeff ends up breaking out of the hospital, killing his parents and murdering a bunch of people in town, including this one gangster, by blowing him up, which is pretty freaking epic. The audio drama version of it is super cool and super fun. Please go listen to it. I'll probably have it in the description. And now we are on to the Pastra rewrite. Pastra is a big creator in the horror / creepypasta community. He does a lot of videos on creepypastas, Abandoned by Disney, Sonic EXE, Laughing Jack, etc., etc. He did an entire Jeff the Killer rewrite, and that's kind of what popped him off. Or I guess he was pretty popular before, but that's how I found him, was through the Jeff the Killer rewrite. Basically, the story takes place in the future, and it's two detectives trying to solve a murder. We later on, I'm not going to spoil this one. I'm not going to spoil this one because you guys should go listen yourself. We get stories from people that are investigating that are basically kind of like the OG creepypastas, different versions of those, like little mini microcosms of Jeff from survivors. I think there's like 4 of them, 4 miniature, almost like anthology shorts of stories of these people escaping Jeff. He killed a bunch of people though. Spoiler alert, I guess that's a spoiler, but I mean, shocker, the guy named Jeff the Killer happens to be a killer. I don't know if that's a big, huge spoiler, but it's a super fun rewrite and you guys should definitely go check it out. I'll have it in the description. Please go look at it. It's super fun. It's super awesome. I really enjoyed it. It really spoke to me. It's kind of what really got me back into creepypastas because I'm pretty sure it came out before Creepcast was even a thing. And it really got me invested into like the concept and the idea of it. It's super fun rewrite. Please go check it out. He has another video on just the lore of Jeff the Killer. I'm a big fan of Pastra's stuff. I've been watching it for a while. I love his rewrite. Please go check his channel out. He has a bunch of other videos just discussing other stuff. Please, 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 I implore you, please check it out. Especially check out David's stuff too. He has a lot of other voice impressions, etc., etc. He seems like a super cool person, and although I did reach out to him, you know, I didn't get in contact with him. But please go check out both of their stuff. I know David has some new stuff coming, and Pastra just posted a cosmic horror video. Go check it out. I mean, no harm, no foul. Just go check it out. See if you like it. Subscribe to them. Both seem like really cool people. And yeah. Okay, so to get into some more lore stuff, let's talk about Jeff the Killer clones. When Jeff the Killer first hit the scene, you know, he was a very popular character, which inspired a lot of other authors to make similar characters. Characters such as Tiki Toby, Nina the Painter, Homicidal Lou, which is Jeff's brother, but as a killer, Clockwork, and of course, one of the most iconic is Jane the Killer. So Jane the Killer goes hand in hand with Jeff usually. Most of her versions, Jeff's the one that killed her parents, and that would lead her down to becoming Jane the Killer. Now, the original version of the Jane the Killer story is a little bit kooky. So the way it works is that Jane, I think Arkansas, after Jeff kills her entire family, Jane is left in charge of her only sister. So she becomes a waitress to make ends meet. I don't think in this version that Jeff disfigured her. I think that Jeff just killed her parents. So she sees a blood donation ad. So she decides to go in for it. And she does. And turns out the blood donation is a secret government testing site because they believe that Jane's blood is the only blood that is able to take liquid hate. Yes, that is what the experimental drug is called. It's called liquid hate. So they think that her blood is perfect for liquid hate for some reason, probably connected to Jeff. So they pump her full of liquid hate against her will, and she becomes basically a super soldier. She becomes evil Captain America, and she goes on a rampage and beats up some soldiers before the government tells her, hey, no, we're hiring you and making you this because we want you to go kill Jeff. So yes, in this universe, the US government cannot handle a 14-year-old emo twink boy with a knife. So they have to inject one of his victims with a secret super governmental drug to make her a super soldier to be able to kill Jeff. And she immediately takes a job. She says, yep, right away. Even though she just killed multiple guards and scientists, she says yes. That is Jane the Killer. That is the original version. Of course, she got rewritten and written so much better way later on, which is obviously the version that most people go with. I think it's Jane Everlasting. I think that's the official version that most people agree with in like the fan communities. But it's so crazy to see the different things that Jeff inspired. I mean, there's even a Jeff the Killer SCP. I think it's SCP-5186, where it's a computer that flashes pictures of Jeff the Killer in a town. And when kids wake up from night terrors, it spawns 15 Jeff the Killer-like entities that just cuddle the kid back to sleep, which is a little weird. But it's so crazy just to think about the stories and iconography and characters that we wouldn't have without Jeff the Killer. I mean, Tiki Toby is probably the more prominent of them, other than Jane. I know that Clockwork is kind of controversial, and also, I'm pretty sure Tiki is pretty controversial as well. I know that Nina the Killer is also super edgy and super dark. It's just very crazy to see that this one very poorly written story inspired all these other authors to write basically blank the Killer ripoffs, etc. That's just really crazy, you know what I mean? Okay, moving on. Which, speaking of the lore of Jeff the Killer, we're gonna switch it back over to lore, and we're gonna talk about that iconic image. That image is probably hallowed grounds for creepypastas. And here's the thing, we have no idea where it's come from. We have the version that came before that version, which is that same picture but with Mr. Potato Head eyes. That version was definitely before the version that we know, but we don't know where the original OG image is from. Mudahar or Some Ordinary Gamers did a video on it, which I'll have linked below. A bunch of other people have done videos on it. It's lost media. We have no idea where it came from. Seuser claimed that it was him that did it. him wearing a latex mask, which is obviously a lie. We found earlier versions of it on, I think, Chinese or Japanese side of the internet way before that Susur story ever came out. So Susur obviously just found that picture and attached it to his version. And that image freaked me the fuck out as a kid. I don't know why, but I always pictured it was like in this glass lobby of, I guess because that was the apartment that I lived in at the time, had like a glass little box when you first entered that you press the buttons on to like call up, buzz up to a door and let you in. It was an apartment complex or a condo or whatever. So I pictured it was just that, and it was him just walking out. And it's so eerie. There's a bunch of edits versions of it. There's like one with like the smile dog smile, which is kind of creepy. Never been a big smile dog guy. It's not really that scary to me. But Jeff the Killer Death did scare me as a kid. And it's super interesting to know that we never found the original image. People are still searching for it, and there's money on the line for it. So if you know, please go find it out. That'd be great for promo for me. If one of my viewers knows where it's from, they figured it out. There's money on the line. There are people that are offering money for people to find the original image. I think like 10 grand or 11 grand, something along those lines. But please, it's a super fun, interesting video. Go down below, click on it, check it out. It's still lost media. People don't know where it is, where it went. We have no idea. Moving on from that, now we're getting into my favorite section. We're going to be doing a read-through of a very popular Jeff the Killer versus battle. Jeff the Killer versus Slender Man. Now, I found this on the Spin Pasta wiki. It's an older story, I assume. I can't really find an author for it. I'll be posting the story in the link below. If you are the author, just message me, let me know. I'll credit you totally. Now, for this story, I did get some voice actors, some people from the Discord, and one voice that you may not recognize, but a very popular person in the Creepcast community. I will be saying it after, obviously, the story. I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get into it. This is Jeff the Killer versus Slender Man. The dark, wet alley was slightly illuminated by Sarah's cell phone light. As she shined it every few seconds to see where she was headed, her eyes scanned the darkness, and she shook crazily. What had happened to her last night was a mystery. She thought back to the bar. She had just come in with some friends, just a fun night out. Nothing could have happened, or so she thought. Now she was trembling, walking from building to building at 3 in the morning. Everything was a blur. She passed an old ratty motel and a pub. Sarah made her way to the outskirts of her neighborhood, around a heavily wooded area. She walked, clenching her eyes shut tight for moments at a time. She was huddled into her coat for warmth, as the cold rain covered her, for what seemed like an eternity. Just as her eyelids took cover of her eyes, something shined out of the corner of her vision. She instantaneously flashed her eyes open once again, and her pupils became wide. She looked around. Nothing stood out in the blackness and the rain. She spun around and continued her way back, hoping she would make it home. As she studied her surroundings, she remembered her shortcut that she took as a kid when playing hide-and-seek with her childhood playmates. It involved climbing through the woods. The cold woman hesitated, but came to the decision that anything that would get her to her warm home quicker is the better way. Sarah headed towards the forest. As she made her way in, the first tree she laid eyes on had been marked. What was marked on the tree mystified her. What looked like a circle with an X inside. She knew nothing of its origin or meaning, so she just assumed this was some kind of gang symbol, or something of the sort. Making her way into the forest, she recalled the fun times she had as a kid. She thought to herself out loud.
Yeah, I miss those times, back when the world was in a...
Her voice trailed off. Sarah heard the loud crack of a tree branch off in the distance behind her. Terrified, she began running through the woods, and she soon became lost. She continued on anyway, hoping for a way out. Her lack of caution quickly resulted in her leg being caught on a near-lying root, and she fell to the ground. Attempting to get up caused her even more pain. She had twisted her ankle.
Somebody please, help me!
She called out. The crunching of leaves became present again. She attempted to stand up and run, but her injury kept her in one place. She clenched her eyes shut out of fear, and as she opened them again, a tall white man dressed in a suit stood before her. She had become visually impaired at the sight of this man. She began screaming in terror, but was soon silenced by the slender, pale man that stood before her in the dark. 4 o'clock. What once was a young boy now was a cold-blooded psychopath. Jeff the Killer had just finished what he called his daily rounds. The slaughtering of innocent people, this was almost all that flooded Jeff's mind. He dragged his feet up the wet cement as he entered what he had called his home for years. Jeff stepped foot into a world of tragic memories. Clutching 2 whiskey bottles in hand, Jeff had become a drunken killing machine. His brain was filled with the scent of murder. One thought that did cross his psychotic mind had been there since day one. As the rain hit the weary house, Jeff began recalling the night in which he slaughtered his entire family. He chuckled at the thought. If it wasn't for his insanity, he may have thought about regret, remorse for taking the lives of the people he once loved. But that wasn't possible at this point. Jeff was out for one thing and one thing only: death. 5:06 in the morning, he took another swig at his alcohol.
What in the fuck am I sitting here for?
Jeff buzzed. As he got up to make his way into the night, he swerved a bit and took another chug at his whiskey. The alcohol hit his warm, bloody lips, and he felt an odd sensation. A sudden urge had hit him. He stood in the room, gazing out at the forest beyond the house. Jeff checked his pockets, cigarette, a lighter, and of course his knife. Jeff knew that something wasn't right. The feeling he got was the mix of the urge to kill again, and something far different than what he had ever felt before. He stormed out of his home, into the cold, wet night. Jeff was now in a dark street, his only light source being a lamp illuminating the road. The rain, still pouring, hit Jeff's back. He started to move in the direction of the forest. He struggled a bit. His alcohol consumption that night had been extremely high. The killer approached the desolate forest. Before he entered, he took a quick glare to his left. Jeff was not far from a cemetery. He trembled towards it. A thought blew into his mind, almost like the wind on a breezy afternoon. The last piece of his family was only feet away, and it beckoned him. He moved his feet away from the forest and towards the graveyard. Slowly, Jeff walked, yet he tripped a few times, spanning the short distance. He approached a grave. Jeff graced it with the rotten odor of death, his jacket being covered in the blood and remains of his victims. Jeff simply gazed at the cold slab of granite. His vision was too distorted to make out any sort of words. Because of this, he just stood and stared. Jeff's insides began to feel uneasy. His throat became dry. The same feeling from just minutes before. Jeff stumbled back to the forest. While trembling towards the woodland, his eyes wandered to a tree a few feet farther out than the others. What looked like a small grayish piece of paper could be seen hanging by a nail. His eyes blurry, he was unable to read it. He took no attempt either and crept into the darkness slowly, almost as if he recognized this place, as if it were his true home. Squeezing his 2 whiskey bottles, he studied the forest in a drunken haze. Jeff admired the darkness. It reminded him of a black hallway, one where the murderer could easily slash the necks of his victims without being seen. As he continued walking, Jeff became, in a way, infatuated. The empty blackness swirled around him, muttering to himself in an unrecognizable gibberish. He continued to trot. Something felt a bit odd. The crunching of the leaves seemed too loud to account for only one person. Jeff felt as if something was lurking beyond his line of sight.
Who's there?
Jeff growled. An abundance of noise could be heard, but nothing out of the ordinary. The chirp of the crickets grew louder as Jeff studied his surroundings.
Come on, chicken. I don't really like games, and not hide and seek at all.
As Jeff announced this, a quick rustling from a nearby bush could be heard. He slashed at it before the sound could come to silence on its own. Jeff then saw what was hidden out of sight this entire time.
Damn rats. You're just some good-for-nothing pests.
Jeff proclaimed as rodents scurried from the leaves. After he had seen what hid in the bush, he continued his midnight stroll. The rain crashing against his back came to a slow stop. His vision was becoming very blurry, and a loud noise was growing within his head. What could be heard was just a figment of Jeff's insane imagination, for the woods were completely silent. He tampered around, dragging his feet and cursing at the almost unbearable noise. Nothing like it had pierced his ears with such discontent before. The noise that drowned Jeff slowly became absent. From the pain, Jeff fell to a tree. Both bottles that were once clenched to his hands fell towards the ground. One crashed against the bark and shattered everywhere. The crack of the glass had viciously dragged Jeff back to consciousness. As his eyes readjusted to the darkness once more, the blurriness was magnified as Jeff saw a white oval-like object hovering above him. His eyes quickly focused from shock. What had been in front of him a few seconds ago was nowhere to be found.
What in the fuck was that?
Jeff chuckled at his own remark. Was his mind playing tricks on him?
Now I know that ain't no damn rats.
He hastily came to the conclusion that something had to be lurking in the darkness, following him from a distance.
That's it. I'm done playing games. Where the fuck are you, you bastard?
Jeff screamed to the top of his lungs in hope of some kind of response. He was answered abruptly. As he started to walk again, he felt the slightest tingle on his neck.
That's not the damn air, fucker. Get the hell out of the bushes before I decide to fuck you up.
Jeff felt wild at this point. Nothing about this place was right, but he was enjoying every minute of it. Swiftly, he pulled his shining blade from his coat pocket and began slashing at trees in the darkness.
Come out, bitch.
He cried out.
No hiding now. I'll cut every last chip of bark to slit your throat.
Jeff pointed his knife towards a tall, thin tree protruding from the left of his vision and stabbed. He was astonished to see that on direct contact, the tree, or what he thought was a tree, faded away into the darkness in a matter of milliseconds. Not knowing what to do, he glanced quickly towards his right and then stabbed at the black night. He peered out into the wood, saw not what he had expected. What stood before the psychotic boy was an extremely tall, thin man dressed in a clean black suit. This was all that Jeff could make out at the time. The darkness caused Jeff's sight to become immensely distorted. Jeff's eyes had cleared again, and he quickly began to observe the man. He was emaciated, his face pale, almost pure white in color. As Jeff studied the face, he soon came to notice the lack of facial features on this man. This thing's face was completely empty. No eyes, nose, or mouth, just a white blank head. This made Jeff feel a bit uneasy, and he soon broke out into a laugh. Although astounded, Jeff soon addressed the figure before him.
So, you were the bastard chasing me through the woods, huh?
Jeff stared at the blankness once more.
You know, I don't know what the fuck you are, but you kind of remind me of myself. You got a big, nice white face, but all you need is a smile.
Jeff began to laugh, uncontrollably at his own notion. Yet he was stopped. Jeff's ears were assaulted by static, and he fell to the ground. He was shrouded in complete darkness as he clutched his ears for mercy. The figure earlier questioned was now causing Jeff extreme pain, while the place where his eyes should have been staring directly into Jeff's. At that point, Jeff snapped. He broke free of the pain, drew his knife once more, and began slashing. Each one of his moves was futile, as the man moved around in no time at all, almost as if he was teleporting from place to place to avoid the attacks. The tall man began to fight back. Jeff had just now begun to notice the tendrils hanging from the back of his attacker. They grabbed at Jeff, and his response was to swing his knife at each that came near him. Jeff managed to slice what seemed to be an arm. In almost an instant, the limb quickly grew back into place. What had just happened astonished Jeff. He felt almost as if the man was a tall tree, and his tendrils simply branches. Jeff fled from the forest, knowing that there was no way he would be able to fight whatever his adversary truly was in what seemed to be its home territory. Jeff rushed from his attacker and found himself at the same place where he had entered. To the right of him lay the cemetery, open space. As he ran past the trees, he noticed one that lay away from the others, the same tree from before. He ran to it out of instinct and read the note he had seen from a distance. Do not enter these woods at night. A tall man has been spotted in the area. Some call him the Slender Man. Beware, and enter at your own risk. Whatever the being that had stalked him into the woods before him was referred to as Slender Man. The name fit perfect with the description of the tall, white figure. Jeff hurried towards the graveyard. He waited for his foe, wielding his sharp, bloody knife. Jeff's wish had been granted as the Slender Man approached from the woods. It seemed as if it was hesitant to leave its home court. Despite its hesitance, it left the area anyway and quickly rushed towards Jeff. The psychopath's instincts started to come back, and he jumped towards the tall man. Jeff was quickly grabbed by his enemy and thrown against a nearby tree. Jeff proceeded to swing again at the tendrils that had grabbed him. He was able to slash at one of Slenderman's main arms. Blood oozed from the deep cut. The white figure showed no emotion and began snatching at Jeff once again. As he continued to smash Jeff against trees and slabs of rock, Jeff's knife slipped from his grip and fell to the ground with Jeff. Colliding with the ground, Jeff's knife slid into his own stomach in a matter of seconds. Blood poured from the wound, and soon the ground was covered in a red liquid. He stood up with a jolt.
Is that the best you got, Slendy? I've taken worse beatings from my father's belt than your big arms.
The Slender Man remained silent, but continued fighting. The man reached for a piece of granite from a tombstone, but before he could take hold of it, Jeff jerked the knife from his gut and flung it directly at Slenderman. Jeff's accuracy was precise, and it sliced off one of the man's limbs. Slenderman's left arm was completely gone. As it fell to the ground with a thud, it was quickly met by a thick blood that barraged from his shoulder. It was completely drenched in blood. Slenderman briskly disappeared into the darkness, but illuminated behind Jeff. In his right hand, he held a broken piece of granite that he proceeded to slam into the side of Jeff's head. Jeff fell to the ground once again, almost knocked unconscious. He was not left there for long before he was seized by his assailant and thrown against the grave. The stone exploded on impact with Jeff, Standing up once again, Jeff's eyes focused on the name on the grave. As his eyes crossed the name on the granite, his black eyes widened. The words written across the gray slab were recognized by Jeff in an instant. He read out his brother's name, Lou. Something was coursing through Jeff. Rage filled him within an instant, and he lashed out at Slender Man at extreme speeds. Jeff's knife was flashing through his suit, as well as his pale skin. Slender Man began teleporting towards the forest.
Come on, bitch. I'm not finished with you yet.
Jeff hollered.
I want to help you get to sleep, Randy. You look awfully tired.
Whatever was flowing through Jeff caused his insanity to go into an overdrive state. He'd become delusional. He ran at Slender Man and back into the forest. He rushed through the woods, not observing his environment whatsoever. Jeff was deep into the forest, still pursuing the man. Slender Man continued warping around in the forest. Jeff's lack of caution caused him to trip on a branch lying in his way. As he crashed into the ground, shards of glass pierced him, and the contents of his pockets were thrown out. His items scattered the ground. As Jeff looked up with his mangled, bloody face, the scent of alcohol graced him. Jeff knew that he had been here before, and he had fallen on this tree and dropped his bottle. Jeff desperately searched the ground for his knife. He felt his hand grab hold of something warm. What he had hoped was his blade. Jeff had grabbed his lighter. He quickly scrapped at it, hoping that the small flames would provide a source of light. His bloody hands covered the plastic in the red liquid. After many desperate attempts, a small orange flame was produced. Jeff threw the lighter out in front of him as he attempted to find his knife that lay close to him. Before he could make another movement, Slender Man appeared before him. The smooth white face they had seen before now was covered in slashes and dark blood. Even though he looked hurt, Slender Man remained strong. Jeff's grip on the lighter became loose. His blood had caused friction between it and his hands. A small blaze dropped towards the ground. Intense flames scorched as the lighter hit the ground. Both adversaries fled away from the flame. Before either of them could put distance between themselves and the flame, it was ignited by the elements that soiled the ground. In a matter of seconds, the forest was burning from the ground up. Jeff looked for safety, yet none was to be found in the flames. Slender Man thought nothing of this and continued to swing at Jeff. Jeff fought back, ignoring the orange and red covering his environment. The tall monster grabbed at Jeff. Jeff grabbed his knife and jumped. To no avail, Jeff was pulled by the Slender Man and was now stuck in his grip. Slender Man began to shake Jeff around him. As he did this, Jeff bit at him, and a loud crack of bone could be heard. The pain surged through Slender Man. Out of shock, he threw Jeff against a large tree. As Jeff flew towards the tree, a sharp pain hit Jeff straight in the back. It continued until he saw a large branch sliding through his torso. He had hit the base of a tree. Jeff had been viciously impaled by a long tree branch. Blood gushed from his mouth, an open wound as he screamed out in pain. Slender Man then fled. He had warped to an area of safety where the forest had not been burned as of yet. He watched Jeff as he attempted to escape. At this point, the Slender Man knew that escape was impossible. The white monster could hear Jeff screaming, even from a large distance away. He continued to warp away from his territory, and left Jeff to burn in the flames. The blaze became brighter and surrounded Jeff. Struggling to avoid the intense heat, he violently slid his body from the tree. Fire engulfed Jeff. Everything swirled around him. He became wrapped up in the flames. There was no hope for Jeff. He had lost his mind long ago, yet this was something different. He had reached his limit, and his state of mind burned just as the forest did.
A young girl by the name of Sarah Burgess had been reported missing. She was last seen dropped in the bar and grill at around 9 o'clock p.m. If you have any idea on the whereabouts of Sarah Burgess, please call the station 404-835-HELP 4357. In other news, a major forest fire has broken out in a local area. The cause has not been discovered. Investigators are studying the remnants of the forest. The fire has been extinguished. This will hurt much of the animal life found in once heavily wooded forest. We'll bring more on this story as it comes.
Mark turned off the television and slumped into his couch cushion.
Hey honey, you want to go take a look at the forest? Well, what's left of it? They've put out the fire that burned the damn thing to the ground. There's also a girl missing. Maybe we'll see her while we're out there.
Can we do it some other time? I'm kind of busy right now, Mark. And if the police can't find that girl, there's no way in hell we can.
Julia protested. Mark argued.
Come on, it won't hurt nothing. It won't be more than a 5-minute walk.
Alright, I guess, but 5 minutes only.
The man put on his shoes and left his house with his wife. As they strolled towards the burnt-out forest, they could see something moving from the opposite direction. It looked somewhat human. As they moved closer towards it, they noticed what looked like severe burns to its face. The creature's eyelids were completely gone, and it carried an unnatural smile that spread across his face. It was completely white, with tints of gray where it looked like he had been burned. Its long black hair was singed. They came closer towards it, and Mark shouted,
Hey buddy, do you need some help?
Mark, stop. We don't even know who he is. He could be a fucking killer for all we know.
Julia whispered, frightened. The man moved swiftly towards the couple. As he approached them, he drew a thick blade covered in red liquid.
I don't know, but I can tell you need some help to sleep.
Jeff slashed the knife across the man's neck and he fell to the ground. His wife began to scream loudly. She was unable to continue as she was next. She was stabbed directly in the heart with the knife.
You don't need to worry about me.
Just go to sleep. What'd you guys think of that story, huh? I'm actually filming this after I recorded and edited that whole section. Did you guys figure out who the guest voice actor was? The girls were a few of my friends. Jeff the Killer was actually someone that I found on TikTok that did a really good Jeff the Killer impression. Some of the Jeff the Killer was also me too, just for a few lines that I really wanted to sell. But voice acting as Mark was the one, the only Darbo. That's right. Me and Darbo, I've spoken to him. But I asked him if he wanted to do voice acting for this story, and he said yeah. It was a really big help. Thank you so much, Darbo, and everybody else that helped me with voice acting. Once again, join the Discord if you guys ever want to voice act or something like that. I do read stories pretty often. So far, I've read a story for each one. So if I need a voice actor, I know who to call. Just please join the Discord. I usually be talking in general pretty often, asking for voice actors for stuff, just to have a little fun. Okay, now on to the next section. Now, I think I want to turn the discussion over to something a little bit more serious. Unfortunately, there is a darker side to the Jeff the Killer story that Papa Meat did a video on, and I've seen a few other creators discuss it as well, and I'd like to also bring awareness to it. This is a true story. This happened in Ohio. In April 2017, Donovan Nicholas was hiding beneath the front staircase of his family's two-story home in Urbana, Ohio, when his father's 40-year-old girlfriend, Heidi Faye Taylor, came down the stairs, and Donovan leapt out and stabbed her 63 times. Due to her injuries, she would unfortunately pass away. Donovan called 911, at first claiming that he killed his stepmother, but then later said that Jeff did. Before the attack, Donovan had carved the signature Jeff smile into his face with a pin in the bathroom. There is photos of this online. I will not be linking any. I will be linking an article discussing the topic. Clearly, Donovan was a very mentally unwell child. He saw the Jeff the Killer iconography and it spoke to him, and unfortunately it led to this terrible, terrible tragedy. Now, he committed these crimes at the age of 14. He's now 21 as of 2023, and he is free. There are other similar crimes committed due to the latching on to the ideas of creepypastas, including the very popular Slender Man murders. It's an unfortunate dark side that mentally unwell people, these kinds of stories speak to them in the wrong ways. And I encourage you that if you're feeling alone, or if you're ever feeling the draw of one of these stories, please remember these are works of fiction. These are not characters you should idolize to be. These are normally terrible, terrible people or entities that have done terrible, terrible things. Please reach out to somebody and get the help that you need. Well, guys, that's it for today's coverage of Jeff the Killer. Sorry to end it on the pretty depressing note of a real life story, but I wanted to talk about it. It's important to the history of Jeff the Killer, and it needed to be talked about. It's a very serious subject, but I hope you guys were okay with the way I addressed it and talked about it. Unfortunately, there's a dark side to a lot of things like this in life, but let's not get distracted by the silly story where it started. I think this was a great episode from the guys. I think this was a great story to cover. I'm glad they covered it. It's very integral to the history of creepypastas and, Slender Man. I don't think we'd have a lot of modern day or analog horror, especially like the Backrooms, Mandela Catalog, things like that. I don't think we would have that stuff without the introduction of like creepypastas, etc., etc. Some might even say that FNAF or other online indie horror type games. I mean, if Jeff the Killer wasn't around and Slenderman wasn't around, no Slender the 8 Pages, things like that, a lot of YouTubers probably wouldn't be as popular as they are. That's just the butterfly effect that this story had, and it starts in such a crazy place. And I'm glad the boys covered it. Next episode is obviously Russian sleep experiment. That one will probably be a little bit shorter than this one. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys liked the Slender Man versus Jeff the Killer story I read. It is very accurate. I do believe Slender Man would just dog the shit out of Jeff the Killer. I mean, he's just an emo teen with a knife. Not much he can do. I hope you guys are glad with my coverage of it. I want to thank you so much for all the love you guys have been showing. I said some thank yous at the beginning. I do want to give some shout outs at the end. I do want to shout out my thumbnail maker. His name is Day Offer. He has no social media, but he needs to make one. He makes great thumbnails. I want to shout out, obviously, Dingo, my artist. I want to shout out Boots. Boots made my banner. I want to shout out anybody that's done art for me or anybody that's helped me on this. Shout out to Darbo. Darbo gave a shout out for the last video. Shout out to SAR Woods. Thank you for the wonderful shout out on your Patreon about my podcast episode. Thank you to all the Creepcast fans. You'll probably be seeing this on the Reddit. I hope you guys enjoy. I hope, the quality's getting better. I hope you guys like this new background image. Thank you to Dipper and Killed by a Yeti for letting me use their music for the last episode. Thank you to, the creator of Jeff the Killer. I mean, we wouldn't have a lot of things now if it wasn't for you. And if you ever see this or hear this, please reach out to me. I'd love to have a chat with you. I don't know if you had a chat with Papa Meat. I know he said the same thing. I have Discord. I have Instagram, everything like that. If you guys want to keep up with what's going on in my life and what's going on with the channel, hop on there. I might be doing a movie review soon. It's a movie the boys have mentioned a few times on the channel. I won't say which one. You'll see when it happens. That's going to be a really fun time. I hope you guys are just enjoying the channel. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for everything, everybody. So I'm going to be signing off here. See you on the next assignment. Professor Creepin, signing off.